What's up, guys? Jumping in here real quick before the podcast to let you know that one of our best sales ever is happening right now. Mountain Tough is half off. So 50% off now until January 10th. We know that everyone's trying to kick off 2025 with a bang. This is the best way to do it. All you need to do is go to MTNTOUGH.com, click Start Free Trial, check out with the code half off, all one word. That's going to get you the 50% off for the year. Please enjoy the podcast.
When you find yourself put into those situations, the pillars are there, and those pillars are designed to carry you through the situation rather than, playing defense and trying to find and create those pillars once you're in it. That's hard.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. I am Dustin Diefenderfer, host and CEO, and we are so glad that you're here diving into these episodes week after week. It is our goal to always bring you an inspiring guest every single week that helps you level up that lifestyle, helps you live that abundant life, and be always ready. If you are a new or a loyal listener, if you have a second, it does mean the world to us to see your rankings and reviews come through for the show. You can do that on any podcast platform you use and you're listening to this episode on. We're big believers in feedback and constructive feedback, as iron does sharpen iron. So we love seeing your feedback on the show, the direction we're headed, and the guests that you would like to see us have on. Additionally, those rankings and reviews allow these episodes through the algorithm to get out to a lot more people to transform more lives. Shifting now to today's guest. Today we have back on the show Kyle Kamp. Many of you know Kyle. He is an expert on nutrition, specifically backcountry nutrition for mountain hunters. So he has an amazing niche where he's working with clients all over the world on their nutrition goals. He works with a lot of diverse clients, but his specialty is on hunters, mountain hunters, Western mountain hunters. So we love picking Kyle's brain. We love to see what kind of advice he has on a reoccurring basis, because he always has piles of wisdom when it comes to nutrition. And my favorite part about Kyle is he keeps it simple. But today is a special episode, as he is going to reveal the challenge that he's asking the Mountain Tough community to participate in starting the new year of 2025. This challenge certainly is going to lead to massive life transformations in a lot of folks across the globe and in the Mountain Tough community. He's going to break down 8 rules that if we follow together for the next 8 weeks, we are going to see some drastic results. The Mountain Tough community will be going through this challenge together, and this episode gives you more detail and background on how it works and how we want you to follow along. So please stand by for my conversation with the Kyle Kamp.
We always say, with people that we work with that mental component of best and worst, you have to fight fair. So if your brain's gonna want to tell you all the worst case scenarios for a lot of people, you have to then be very intentional about then saying, well, what's the good things that could potentially come of this? Mm-hmm. So if I'm gonna let my brain go towards all the potential negative implications, I have to fight fair and then ask myself, well, what are the potential positives of this too?
Yeah.
And that's hard to do, was for us, especially when you've got in this scenario, the risk was financial, but sometimes it's something different. And so when the risk is high in your mind, you go into automatic preservation mode,
Yeah.
And losing my dad 3 years ago or so just changed that for me in terms of I would always be very conservative, and I'm still conservative, but if it makes sense, even if the risk is high, then I feel like I now tend towards, I'm going to try.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Do you think losing your dad made you less risk adverse?
Oh yeah. And a lot of that was because I knew growing up with him, I knew his approach to life, which was he was very conservative towards things for a moment in time, which means he was very financially conservative, very risk averse for the most part for retirement. His goal was, I want to play it safe, get there, and then I'll really live. And he died the year he was retiring. And so I watched him.
That's brutal.
Essentially make all decisions in life towards this, which like a lot of people could say is wise. And to some degree it is. Like you also can't just go do whatever you want and be like, YOLO, but yeah, I think whenever I saw that, I realized, or at least it was really visceral to me, how short life is.
Yeah.
And, at that point I thought, man, I don't want to not take advantage of things make sense just because I'm nervous about it. And on the flip side of that, like it does need to at least make some logical sense to me, right? But even if it's scary, I now tend to still pursue it, even where maybe before I wouldn't have.
How old was he
when he died?
Yeah,
Let's see, he was early 60s, 63. So he came out to visit us. He had a lot of like just bizarre things on that visit. One example is he packed a whole suitcase and he brought toys for our kids, a couple of Lunchables, no clothes. So it's just these weird things kept happening. He goes home, he's at work, falls into a filing cabinet. They take him to the ER. He's got a brain tumor. That was in May. Gets surgery. It's cancerous. That was in March. He died in June. So it was just very like very fast type of a thing. But he was, early 60s.
It's pretty wild how many people get sick or pass away really close to that retirement age.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for us and my wife and I, we still want to be wise and still want to be good stewards of our resources and the things that God's given us. But at the same time, like we talked about with the land and the purchase of the house and stuff, I don't want to be so heavily swayed towards the data that I'm afraid to trust God on big leaps of things, right? And so, going back and looking at us praying through that, there was this strong urge towards doing it, even as nervous as I was. And for me, that's always been like God speaking to us. As people, people would say, like, I've never heard the audible voice of God, but and you said this on the podcast too, and I would agree with you. There's these urges and nudges that you just kind of feel drawn towards in your heart, even if you're nervous. And then you'll start to see if you're intentionally pursuing and praying about something. You said this, and this is the part that I agree with too. You'll have just these little affirmations start popping up in your life, whether that's someone else saying something kind of out of the blue, or you hear something, you read something, and it's just kind of repetitious, right? It's repetitious over and over and over again that you start seeing these things. And at least in our lives, for Lindsay and I, which is my wife, those have always been just good affirmations of like, all we can do is do the best we can, be obedient to what we know. Like, I don't think you can ever go wrong with that. And if somehow you miss the mark and you fail, then you still got each other. You figure it out. I've found, like in my life, I spent for a long early chunk of my life a lot of time trying to be risk averse, trying to set up my entire life to avoid anything to complicate my life. Then I started to realize, like, if I get in a situation that I wasn't planned for, I'm pretty good at dealing with it on the fly. So even if I take these risks and they don't pan out, history would tell me that we'll figure it out. Like, I don't know what that looks like, but we're, I've never really come across anything that we can't just at least sort through. So
history helps a lot. And it's crazy because you can look at your whole entire life, and every time that you felt a transition coming, and never once did God abandon you.
Yeah.
But even knowing that and living through that, even in a new transition, you still can be overcome with a lot of fear and doubt.
Yeah.
But stopping and looking back always helps me a ton, because no matter what in my life, if I look back, any major move, any major job change, any major life change, there's that same feeling of fear and doubt. But you were never starving, you were never living on the street. You were surviving with a lot of money or little money. There was never a time you were completely abandoned. But it's funny how quickly we forget those things.
Yeah.
And it's hard. But recalling history is a really helpful tool.
There's a passage in the Old Testament about Moses and Aaron and them carrying a staff, like, they used to do when they were going through the wilderness. And as history would tell us, like, a lot of times they would put a mark on their staff to mark something monumentous. And even in the Old Testament, like, they would build monuments when big things would happen of, not necessarily big monuments of stones, but sometimes it would just be markers of, we put this in place when this big event happened to be a reminder of what God did at this point in time. And I think that, like, this is the modern day, nick in the staff, right? Is like, you should be. I try to take mental note every time. And now, like, you build such a library of times that God is showing up or not abandon you, and it helps. The irony in that is there have been times where we've needed to make a decision or sought something, and it wasn't as obvious. Like, you might look at it and say, God was silent. And I think in those moments you can recall on that history and remember his faithfulness and give you an idea of what to do there. And I think that he, I can't speak for him, but I think that he does that at times just to remind you of his faithfulness, and grateful for him.
Yeah. I always think about unanswered prayers like that Jesus prayed for that cup to pass him on the cross. And then he eventually said, your will be done. And he accepted that he was going to go through this torture. But he prayed to his dad that it did not have to be that way. And so God at that moment had a pretty significant unanswered prayer. But if it wouldn't have happened that way, if God would have answered that prayer and not let Jesus be sacrificed on the cross, then we wouldn't be talking about Jesus now, 2,000 years later. And so many times when we're praying for these things and they don't happen, it feels like prayer doesn't work, or prayer is not working as fast as we want it to. But there are so many reasons that they're unanswered.
Yeah, you this is such a sidebar from our nutrition conversation, but you bring up an interesting point, because when my dad died, not to circle everything back to this, but I hope this is helpful for people. When he died, like, I was in immense need of feeling some, like, comfort and relief, and I didn't feel it, and it baffled me, and I struggled with that, like, for a long time, like. And, the words that I would say in lieu of that were, why didn't you help, or whatever. But I never abandoned. Like, I'd had too many of those memories to sit here and say, well, God must not exist if he didn't show up in that time. And it wasn't until, like, a year later, after the emotion had died down, in my prayer time, my devotional time, or whatever, that I felt like God sort of reminded me in my heart, you're still a human. Like, I was there, but it doesn't mean you won't grieve, and that losing your dad won't be painful. Like, you are still here, and when you're here, you'll feel those things. It doesn't mean that I don't exist, but as a part of humanity, I'm not going to swoop down there and move emotions that make you human. Yeah. as a part of that, what got me through that, even though it felt less silent, or it felt more silent than what I was used to, was memory. It's like just memory of all the times you've come through in the past, memory of your faithfulness. And even though I don't feel it, even though I was frustrated, even though I'd be screaming, like, where are you? What is wrong with you? Do something for me, right?
Yeah.
I knew that I knew that I wasn't abandoned. And it was in those previous stones that I had seen him answer prayers in, that got me through that until I did start to calm the emotion and remind myself of looking back of what he had done. But right after he died, I just didn't care, man. Didn't care about being I wasn't interacting with my kids, wasn't interacting with my wife. And I remember walking around just feeling like I recognize I'm doing this and I just don't care. And I remember a walk in the fall. He died in the spring, so way too long to be walking around like that. But I remember thinking, yeah, you do. You care. Yeah. And it was at that point was sort of this trigger of all right, you're still not going to feel great about all this, but you can't not be a dad to Grant and Sam or a husband to Lindsay. And so you've got to figure out how to still be a human and process this, but still show up for them. Yeah. Because as easy as it is to just be sort of I don't know, you guys deal with your own life, I'm dealing with mine. I didn't want that, and so, yeah, I think it's stuff like that is tricky because we think that we should process it in one way. And I think men in particular and women have pressure to show up in different areas of their life. And if you don't, then you feel guilty for not showing up, yet at the same time, emotionally, you don't care. And then it just takes time. I think that's one thing that I've learned in all of it is time really doesn't heal all wounds, but it does help make things clearer. And, making no massive decisions then. But going back to the origin of this, yes, I think seeing him die definitely made me less risk averse, to where if it makes sense, I'm willing to at least try.
Hey guys, I did want to interrupt for a quick minute right here and let you know about some supplements I've been taking. I did shy away from supplements for a long time. I was always cautious about what they were made out of, where they were from, and who the team was behind the brands. But over the last couple of years, I've got to meet the team at Mountain Ops from top to bottom, and they are an amazing group of humans. I've got to know the CEO, Trevor Farnes, really well, and he is a mission-focused individual that cares about humans living a better quality of life so that they can have that abundant life. So over the last couple of years, he has helped me add some things that have changed the game for me. One of those things that I've added is creatine from Mountain Ops. It helps me maintain some muscle mass, but also it's a big player in cognitive function, one of the most researched supplements out there. Also, I've added reds, greens, and protein, all from Mountain Ops. What I found as a busy professional, always on the run, I do eat a whole foods diet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but on the go, it's hard to get enough vegetables, fruits, and protein. So I've added that from Mountain Ops, and it has significantly changed the game. I can feel it in my performance. I haven't got sick for a long time, and I can certainly feel it in my mental clarity as well. The last thing I've added is the Mountain Tough Hydrate product for the backcountry, for hunting season. When I'm in the hills, I do run short on those electrolytes. We even have a Mountain Tough flavor, the Mountain Tough Lemon Lime Hydrate, and that is a game changer for hydration in the backcountry. So I keep it really simple. That is all I've added to my protocol, and it has certainly helped me, and I certainly believe in the team and the culture behind Mountain Ops. They have started an initiative that's been around for a while called Conquer Hunger. Conquer Hunger is giving meals to hungry kids that aren't getting enough food, and they've given out over 6 million meals plus to kids through their Conquer Hunger initiative. So every order that happens at Mountain Ops, a percentage of that order goes to Conquer Hunger. So certainly an incredible company, an incredible culture. As a listener to the show, you do get an exclusive offer to Mountain Ops, so make sure you check that out. The offer is incredible as a first-time purchase at mountainops.com. So build your order if it's your first time. They are offering you a 20% exclusive discount. All you need to do is enter the promo code MOUNTAINTOUGH, all one word, all caps, for 20% off your first order at mountainops.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. And it does kind of connect into our challenge announcement today for this show, because I think that as you were talking, it does remind me of how much more difficult these type of things that we're all going to run into in our lives can be if you add on additional layers of complexity to your life. So, which is the majority, it's common and it's normal, but you could have gone through that season of losing your father with no nutritional, spiritual, mental, or physical preparation. And that happens to a lot of individuals. So then you're going through a traumatic event, major adversity in your life, but you also may be out of shape. You may have an alcohol problem. You may have no time outdoors connecting to nature, and all of these things that you just mentioned you're fighting through become magnified, and it becomes much more difficult to get through. Yeah. And that's why Mountain Tough has always been such a believer in you have to strengthen these pillars. And it's the bar stool analogy that we talk about over and over and over again, that there's these legs holding up your life, and there's the physical leg, and there's the mental leg, there's a spiritual leg, and there's a nutritional leg. And you can't just be great at one of them. We all want to at times just be great at one of them. And especially men, it's pretty easy for us to idolize things. And, fitness can be an idol. And if that bar stool of fitness is crazy strong, but mentally we're weak, or spiritually we're weak, or nutritional we're weak, that bar stool is going to still fall over. And that analogy is our life falling over, and that is being stuck in those circumstances for years and years and years, and them continuing to get worse and worse and worse before we can get out of that hole or get out of that rock bottom. Yeah. And that's why I'm really excited about this that we're announcing right now, is because we've seen Mountain Toughers work on those 4 pillars and have had complete life transformations. And this is just one more tool they can use to work on those pillars, work on that life transformation. This one is nutritional focus, but it's more than that. It's more than just nutritional focus. It does have the ability to tie in, to the physical and mental as well. But I'll let you announce it, Kyle, and kind of break down how it's going to go for everybody.
Yeah, well, I think you guys have done a great job providing so many resources that are available to people and easily accessible by putting it all in one app, right? I mean, the ethos is those 4 pillars, and you guys don't just talk about them. I mean, I personally know you and know you live them, but you've also just made it very accessible to people. And I think that, one of the interesting things about this, and, this is called the Live Ready Challenge, and we'll talk about, that here in a minute, but it's easy to think you don't need those things until you're in it, until whatever it is, right? Like for me, it was death of my dad or other things throughout the course of my life. And in reality, like you were saying, a lot of what carried me through that is that those were there. And so the Live Ready Challenge as a part of the whole, the whole idea and thinking of always staying ready with Mountain Tough is that when you find yourself put into those situations, the pillars are there, and those pillars are designed to carry you through the situation rather than, playing defense and trying to find and create those pillars once you're in it. That's hard. That's really hard. So, I think using any component, whether it's the spiritual dailies, the fitness aspect through the gym dailies or the MGDs or one of the programs, or, this with nutrition or whatever, really, like, the New Year's a great time to start it. Anytime's a great time to start it, but the New Year seems to be like a marker for people.
Yeah.
Even if your life seems perfect, it still would be a great time to start it, because I would love for it to, but probably isn't going to be perfect for the rest of your life, right? And those pillars being in place are key. And so we created 8 essential pillars for this Live Ready challenge with nutrition. And the idea of the 8 pillars isn't so much outcome driven, meaning, we're not aiming for you to lose poundage, and we're not aiming for you to look like a chiseled Greek god, and we're not aiming for any of those things. It's just 8 basic, simple principles that will put you in a position nutritionally to live ready. And sometimes that simply means, like, when you show up to work, whether that's a weekend at home with your kids or it's your actual physical job that you get paid for, you have enough energy to get through 8-hour workday and be productive to that employer, to your family, or whatever, right? And nutrition can play a big role of that. And so for each of the 8 elements that we've designed, like, that's the entire goal. Is it's not restriction. It's not about you setting a list of rules of foods you can and can't have. There are 8 different pillars that are designed to help you feel and able to live ready, have great energy levels, be productive physically, be present emotionally, all of these, to have the energy to do whatever it is that you're called to do, whether that's something you're required to do through your job or something you volunteer for, or something that's a hobby like hunting or whatever. That's what they're for. So yeah, we'll walk through the 8 different pillars while they're there. And there's a lot of exciting stuff that we've done around that. We've recorded this week with Nate. So
yeah, I'm excited because the Live Ready challenge, the one key to it is going to be its simplicity, which we know works. We know it's effective. We know that simplicity leads to, how do you say it every time?
Complexity kills compliance.
Yeah, complexity kills compliance. So we took the complexity out of this, and we've seen it also through, like, the dailies in the Mountain Tough app, like knowing that you have an MGD every single day and it's fresh, knowing that you have daily prayer every single day and all you need to do is click on it, has created this movement in the Mountain Tough community. And part of that movement is taking as much complexity out of it as we can. And by removing that complexity and seeing people stick through these programs and these habits for the long run being like 21 days, 30 days, 45 days, it creates that complete life transformation. And that's what we're looking for here. And so it is extremely simple. But let's break down what it looks like.
Nope, that's good. The complexity kills compliance thing really allows people to be consistent, and whether it's spiritual, physical, or nutritional, you can nail anything a couple times, that really won't do anything. If you can be consistent a large majority of the time, that will. The other thing that we like to say is I would rather be consistently good than occasionally great, and that is true of this. So pillar number 1, rule number 1, however you want to phrase it, is we want you to have a source of protein at each meal. Right now, protein is a nutrient that gets talked about all the time, and you've got ranges of, advice from you should only eat meat, to where it's only protein, to different styles of protein from supplements or vegetarian sources, blah blah blah. The idea is having a source of protein for really a couple of key reasons. Number 1, we know that as we age, we lose muscle mass at a rate of 3 to 8% per decade, beginning at age 30, right? And so there's really two known ways that we know we can lean more towards the 3% of that as opposed to the 8% of that. You're not going to prevent it. You know, I mean, you see a guy like Jack LaLanne, right? Super fit.
Yeah.
As he got older, he still looked super fit, but not nearly as much muscle mass as he had back then.
Yeah.
And not that muscle mass is completely correlated with physical ability, but it is to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you have a degree of muscle mass based on your weight and composition, you're more than likely going to be able to do things you want and live ready. So regular resistance training, physical fitness, adequate protein intake are the two pillars for being on that 3% instead of that 8%. And so you can get lost in the weeds of grams of protein per pound of body weight and this and that. But the reality is that if you get a person to have regular protein doses throughout the course of the day, you're going to have a steady stream of fuel repairing that muscle and holding on to it. If you're off by 20 grams, let's say that your recommended protein needs per day is 160. And by following our simplistic method, which doesn't have you counting grams, you get to 140. Is that 20 grams going to be the difference between you retaining muscle and losing it? No, it's not. And the nice thing about that is it's doable for people. It's doable for a person to look at what they're eating and say, is there some kind of high quality protein in this? And if not, what can I include? As opposed to, okay, I need 30 grams at this meal. Based on my protein source, I now need to get on this database and track, and calculate, well, how much of a portion size do I need to get to that 30 grams? And I've got to meet 160. So now you're drinking, pounding protein shakes at 9 p.m. just to meet this number.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot simpler to achieve, basically the same end outcome.
Just by adding that protein each time you eat.
Exactly. The second element of it is protein is a nutrient that allows you to feel like you've actually eaten something. Oftentimes, we, especially in the U.S., where we are so busy, especially now as we become more and more technology-driven, online-driven, there really are no parameters for work. It's like you're always working to some degree.
Yeah.
So as we've gotten more and more busy, most people are just eating something, and they're eating just enough to pacify the hunger cue, but not quite enough to have that hunger cue stay gone for a while. So they wind up just grabbing these very quick sources of energy that last for an hour, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. So your calorie intake ends up being really high over the course of the day just because you're kind of snacking. So including sources of protein allow you to feel like you've had something to eat and provide staying power. The technological or the technical term that we use for this is satiety, right? It fills you up and holds you over, which ultimately leads to two things for the live ready piece of this. Number one, you're not just randomly snacking. There's intentionality to your intake. But number two, it also provides more stable energy levels. So you're not finding you feel better for 25 or 30 minutes and then you dip again. And you feel better for 25 and 30 minutes and you're ready for a nap at 2. So the inclusion of protein isn't just that it's the very bro thing to do right now. It's prevention. It's trying to prevent the loss of muscle mass as we continue to age, which to some degree we are going to have, but we're trying to prevent as much of it as possible and to really bring good, stable energy levels through the course of the day because it just provides more lasting energy as opposed to, something that's quick just to pacify the hunger and then we're hungry, 20 minutes later again.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the turtle boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Use promo code TOUGH for a free Turtlebox hat with the purchase of a Gen 2 speaker. The hat must be added to your cart before entering the promo code TOUGH, TOUGH. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. Yeah, I think about the millions and millions of people that I've seen, and it's quite common just to eat cereal every morning for breakfast out there. And the spike in that glycemic index after eating high sugar cereal right when you wake up. There is some protein in there, but it's very, very minimal. And then you have that blood sugar spike, and then an hour later, you're hungry and crashing out of energy. And it was incredibly apparent when you made that change with Randy Newberg's diet, where he was trying to get his 40 grams of protein just in the evening. And you're like, hey, Randy, just eat protein at every meal. And seeing his energy levels change because he was working out in the lab every day when you guys had that consultation was a game changer, because he used to come in pretty sleepy in the afternoon around 3 for his workouts. Yeah. And then he started just getting protein all the time throughout the day. And he would just come in these doors fired up. So it's so simple. Just, make sure there's great protein in every meal. Like everyone can do that.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't need to be complicated. I mean, you can grab a Greek yogurt out of the fridge or a couple of hard-boiled eggs and bring them with you. Like, it doesn't need to be that you're making this, massive protein spread or anything. But yeah, it's it can certainly help.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer too, related to number one, the muscle mass as you age is so important for quality of life. I mean, we've all seen people in their 60s, 70s that lack some mobility, but the ones that lack a significant amount of muscle mass, the activities that it does inhibit them from doing in their 60s and 70s is massive. You can even find 60-year-olds that are having difficulty getting up and down like football stadium bleachers. Yeah. And you compare that to the individuals that have trained to keep that muscle mass into their 60s, and they're doing some pretty extraordinary things.
Yeah, one of the couple of the most interesting stats that I've seen with this is that the best play that you could have is to build as much muscle mass as you're genetically able in your 20s and 30s, and then you fight the rest of your life to keep it, right? Because once you hit 30, it starts to decline at think about that, 3 to 8% per decade. That's pretty alarming. And the place that I saw this come up the most and was most fascinating to me was when I worked at the hospital several years ago. There's a lot of interesting statistics around the mortality rate, or the likelihood of someone dying after they first have their first fall and fracture. Yeah. Right. And you would think that it would be, doing something exciting. One of the places that we see it is getting off the toilet. They lose their ability to be able to stand firmly and confidently off of a toilet after going to the bathroom. And so they'll often fall forward or to the side, and it'll create a fracture. And for whatever reason, that initial fracture, when you compare that to the number of years a person lives after that initial fracture, mortality risk is a lot higher. And I just found that to be fascinating. So you'll hear, people in their 40s, 30s, or whatever, wanting, not necessarily seeing the reason why they should worry about it. And they'll make comments like, I'm married. I don't really care what I look like. And that's great. And I'll say, well, do you like getting off the toilet? Because it's going to matter, And again, just like we were saying, the live ready piece isn't just trying to get ready once you have this issue pop up in your life. It's establishing pillars that you can lean on once you get in these issues in your life. The muscle mass thing isn't, there is an element of you having a quality of life. I won't go down the rabbit hole that my brain is thinking. However, it is also a pillar that you're going to be able to lean on later in life too. And that version of you may thank you more than the version of you now, but it's just a consistent thing to try to hold on to as much as possible. Not so you can look like the greatest guy in the room, although if you do, congratulations. It's more about your ability to do things that you love, know, and that changes from doing workouts and stuff in the mountains to playing with your kids, to playing with your grandkids, to getting off of a toilet. Yeah. It's an evolutionary thing. And it's just one of the things I love so much about nutrition and training is you've always got a reason to do it. Always, always. There's no age limit on when it stops becoming valuable, because it never does. Yeah. It never stops being valuable in your overall health.
Yeah. It's a game changer. Okay, so number 1, protein with every meal. Let's go on to number 2.
Number 2 is no calorie intake outside of established meal times. Or like another way you could put it would be having some structure to your meals. So you could make this as simple as I'm going to eat a breakfast, a lunch, and a dinner, and any calorie intake outside of those times is off limits. I'm not drinking mochas. I'm not drinking lattes. I'm not popping fun-size Snickers off of the boss's desk around Halloween. I'm not eating my protein bar or protein pastry or all the different protein. I'm having 3 solid meals and no snacking outside of that. Between 20 and 40% of the American diet comes from random mindless snacking. So that's
crazy.
Pretty high calorie intake. Now, the other piece that's important here is part of having structure, especially as you start a new program. It's not about restriction of what you're doing. Part of it is we want to make sure you're getting enough so you can go execute your workouts. And so you're not putting yourself in a position of unneeded starvation all of the time to where you can't be consistent. And when people start something new, they're usually pretty conservative. Right. And the risk with that is that they never are eating enough. So part of having structure is ensuring you're getting enough food to feel like a human.
Which is common with people training hard.
Exactly. And then so the other piece of it, though, is, we're trying to prevent from going over. And I love this analogy that we use where if you and I were to go to a gas station, a lot of what's going to determine how much gas we get is going to be based on how much gas is in the car, how much gas we need based on where it is that we're going. If we've already got a full tank when we pull up to the pump, we don't gain anything by putting more gas in. I mean, in fact, if anything, we're going to make a mess. Yeah. And nutrition's a lot of the same way. So having these different timelines is not about the restriction and hyper restriction of food. It's like there's no intentionality in the fueling. What are we accomplishing? In fact, it's probably just driving you further away from living ready or, accomplishing whatever it is that you want. So it's very easy for this one, for number 2, to be painted as though we're trying to restrict things and restrict calories. It's not. It's trying to get the appropriate intake in for the type of life that you live, which includes training, includes time with your kids, whatever your job is. All of those elements are going to be true, but that 20 to 40% intake of just mindless random eating is not serving any intentional purpose. It's a high number.
Yeah. It's a high percentage.
The other piece of this is when we eat, we have hormonal signaling. One that people will probably be familiar with would be insulin. The more we expose ourselves to just random food, the less effective that signaling is. And so you'll hear terms like insulin resistant start to pop up. A lot of what happens with that is there's a constant overstimulation from us eating all of the time. So we may produce enough to cover 3 meals, but if we're constantly exposing it, the body in essence is saying, look, I've got enough to cover the basics, but the extra gas you're throwing in right now, I don't have enough for that. And it's an overstimulation or overexposure. So I can't signal as well as I could.
Is that the like pre-diabetes?
I mean, insulin resistance can lead to prediabetes, and if not controlled, lead to like type 2 diabetes. But that is like a precursor. And I love like, so we're recording this around Thanksgiving. This is, before the holidays, and everybody's getting ready to travel, and they're probably thinking of like, man,
Food.
I can't wait to see so-and-so, or can't wait to see my cousins. I can't wait to see whatever. And you get there and you start to remember, I like Brad, but I didn't like Brad this much, right? And so when you get there, you're like, Brad has his certain routine that he wants to take and show you, and you're willing to concede and go do those things. But the longer you're there, the more the overexposure starts to happen, the less likely you're going to want to acquiesce to his requests. You become less sensitive, and overexposure to food makes that signaling less sensitive. And so having periods of time where there is no intake is good. Now, we, like a lot of things in our culture, have taken that to the extreme and say, oh yeah, you need 72 hours of this, right? To really prevent this. You don't, but you do need periods of time where there's not just these random things coming in. A comment that we get a lot is people will say, I don't understand how I'm not losing weight. I hardly ever eat. And you'll look at their intake logs and I'll start to see, you're right, you don't ever eat, but you have constant intake from lattes and mochas and
snacks.
Yeah, just these snacks and drinks. And, one of the things that's become popular is snacks that are sort of coated in health, like protein pastries and protein cookies and protein bars. A majority of the calories in a lot of those are higher in fat and carbs than they are protein. And most of the protein coming from those bars are from different powdered whey supplements. And we know that whey processes faster than any other source of protein on the market, right? In fact, like if you were to measure whey protein against a slice of white bread, you would see a similar insulin response.
Crazy.
So you have, and like, I do not blame the consumer. I blame the companies.
Yeah.
The companies frustrate me to no end because they are marketing. People that are buying this, they don't know. They're like, okay, well, guys like this say eat more protein. I'm busy, so this seems like a convenient option. I'll just eat these every day. This has to be great. And what you wind up doing is you eat 3, 4, 5 of those a day. You get more carbs and fat than you may have gotten from, an actual menu item. You're so hungry by the time you get home that you just go nuts. And so you end up exceeding your intake in the evening, not necessarily because you've got bad options at home. Your options at home could be great. It's just because of poor messaging from companies that you've taken to heart early on and made most of your diet around. And then you'll say, like, I am trying, but I don't see why I'm not getting the outcome that I should be seeing based on what I'm doing.
You got to be careful.
And you can look at it and you can say, well, I don't mean this arrogantly, but I can see why. And here's why. And, it's really eye-opening to people. So having these set meal times, is not, again, about restriction of any kind. It's more to set people up for success so they can see the outcome that they want and live ready.
I love it. So rule number 1, protein with every meal.
Yep.
Then we're going into 2, which is set meal times.
No calorie intake outside of meal times, but yes, I think you could say and set meal times.
Yeah. So no calories outside of meal times. And if I'm a 4 meal a day guy, is that okay?
Yes.
So whatever your routine is, whether it's 2, 3, 1, or 4, you have that protocol and you're not eating snacks or anything else outside of that protocol. That's going to even including drinking calories, such as your frappuccinos.
Yep. Yeah. So, I said that could be as simple as breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It could also be times, 8 a.m., noon, 3 p.m., 8 p.m. None of those things matter. The main idea, though, is have established intentional intake, and anything that comes outside of that, you're not having.
Hey guys, there are a lot of trends out there, And one trend that I've personally found in my own life through experience that has been a game changer is cold plunging and cold water therapy. The benefits for me have been off the charts when it comes to two main categories. The physical inflammation reduction from cold plunging every day has been a complete game changer, but my favorite part of cold water therapy has been the mental aspect, the mental clarity, the stress reduction, and most importantly, the ability to build mental toughness every day in a very simple way by just forcing myself to get in that cold water has been a drastic improvement that is easy, fast, and efficient. I've tried countless different ways to access cold water therapy, from the redneck version horse troughs to building my own cold plunge system off Amazon parts and pieces. Every time I've tried that, it has been a disaster until we found Ice Barrel. Ice Barrel is the most advanced barrel design on the market, and they have the most advanced high-tech chiller on the market as well. I've met the CEO, I've worked out with the CEO, we've had them at the lab. They're a great team, American-made manufacturing, and we're proud to announce that you can now access a discount on Ice Barrel products. All you need to do as a podcast listener is use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH. That's going to get you 15% off all Ice Barrels except the chiller. Again, that's MOUNTAINTOUGH, all caps, all one word, on icebarrel.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast.
People who aren't familiar with our first podcast, I lost a lot of weight many years ago and sort of developed this myself. I was getting ready we did the Grand Canyon rim to rim to rim in April, and I was cleaning up the kitchen the week I got back from that, and a couple jelly beans fell on the counter from like something that I was taking in whenever we were in the canyon. And normally, like, I'd eat those. And frankly, the 10 calories that would have come wasn't going to affect my day. But for me, the mindset of there is no intake out, you don't need those, like that, even though it's only 10 calories, that's doing nothing for you.
Yeah.
And so you don't have them. And so the idea here is the same, you're trying to establish good habits that continue you on for life in a basic sense. And so even though that seems like not that big a deal, and it's not, the idea is you're trying to stay in that mentality of this isn't providing me anything. This isn't providing me any fuel of any kind.
Yeah.
And so if I want this at lunch at noon, fine, I'll put them in there and have it at noon. It's not about the calories or the fact that they're even jelly beans. It's that you're trying to establish some good core habits.
It's mindset, discipline at the same time.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to number 3.
Number 3 is have a source of produce at every meal. Now, like, the term or the thing that most people are going to correlate with this is fruits and vegetables. And this too is intentional. So the first thing is having some produce with your meal provides volume in very few calories. So again, the idea is you're trying to make it feel like you've actually had something to eat when you go to eat, because it's going to provide staying power. It's going to provide satiety, right? So those type of foods will generally provide that in a very low calorie package, which are going to help you adhere to whatever your goals are, whether that's training or weight loss or whatever. Like, we've talked about the triangle before and focusing on those different things in our nutrition program that lives in the app. The second element, and I think these next two are probably more important than the first, even if I'm honest, but the second element of it is that when we eat something, we know that that's going to provide fuel, right? But we don't really realize, or we don't think about the fact that at some point that entree item or thing that I've cooked undergoes a process in which it becomes fuel in the body. Like, it no longer becomes, a steak and potato. Eventually it becomes carbohydrates that power my workouts, and steak becomes protein that recovers the muscle. There's a conversion process that we have in our body that allows that to happen. The ability of that conversion process to operate optimally is largely driven by nutrients. fruits and vegetables contain the largest concentration of these nutrients. So the greater the intake, the more that these are present, the more that can operate optimally. The third element, maybe even more important than the first two, is that there is a very strong correlation between the prevention of chronic disease and fruit and vegetable / produce intake. This is, I will say this is highly controversial right now because you have a lot of people saying plants are killing us. We have no data that suggests that really. In fact, when you look back at the data, most everything that we know of from a research standpoint done with actual people is that most of those people have reduced risk of chronic disease. And maybe the one that's most compelling to me is a significant reduction in the chance of developing most cancers, right? Now,
from produce.
Yes. And a lot of that is coming from the nutrients in produce, and a lot of that is coming from the fiber in produce. And we do a podcast, and we cover frequently asked nutrition questions that people have. And one of them was, if I'm a hunter and I keep seeing all of this messaging about red meat killing us, should I stop hunting? That's the only reason I hunt, right? And so we covered this. And I had already had an interest in this because we hunt, and I care about as much as and as passionate as I am about hunting and being in the mountains, I'm equally passionate about living a long life, right? And so, I sort of had processed this myself whenever that information started coming out. And as I went back to research it, the number one thing that you end up finding is that there is like an unequivocal correlation between a high intake of fiber from whole grains, fruits, vegetables, etc., and a significant reduced prevalence of a person developing most types of cancer, especially colon cancer. Right. And so that's a fairly common one that people will get as they get older. And so
very
like
common.
when you look at that, not only do we not see anything that says plants are killing us, we see the complete opposite that says if you're choosing these things, they are helping you in a pretty significant way. And so again, it's not the old adage of, eat your 5 fruits and vegetables, or these are healthy for you. It's very much, if you're just aiming to have some throughout the course of the day, your days add up to weeks, your weeks add up to months, your months add up to years, and everything that we see, which is all we've really got to go off of, right? Everything we see is that you reduce your risk of developing a lot of what people are worried about. And it's a very, no pun intended, low-hanging fruit type of way to ensure you live ready in just about every sense of the word. And I think practically, you make it your aim to buy 4 or 5 apples a week, you buy 4 or 5 bananas a week, you buy 4 or 5 oranges a week, you buy a bag of salad mix, and then you just make it intentional. Take those to work with you, have them at lunch, make sure dinner's got something in it. It doesn't need to be overtly complicated and shaved balsamic Brussels, roasted in olive. Like, it doesn't need to be hard,
Keep it simple.
Yeah.
What about the green and red powders? Any value there at all?
Green and red, there's value in having the nutrients, right? And so you'll have people who will say, look, hear you, love the message, can't stand the taste of any vegetable on the face of the planet. For those folks, they will get the advantage of having the nutrients that we talked about earlier, but there's going to be less of an advantage because you're not getting the fiber element. The fiber element from eating those things comes because as that food is in the colon, it's literally dragging out a lot of those elements that are causing risk. Yeah. So I started out by saying we evaluated the red meat thing. The number one thing that we see driving up colon cancer risk is processed meats. So like for hunters, jerky, salami, brats, sausage, those type of things. And any meat that is grilled over an open flame, seared. So there's a development of carcinogens that happen between the flame and the meat, the proteins in the meat, that we know when we eat those really increase colon cancer risk. Where the fruits and the vegetables come into play, whole grains as well, is it's literally dragging some of that stuff out. So if that's not there, those still exist, and obviously you risk you come to terms with whatever that risk is. So the greens and the reds, you get the nutrients, but you lack the fiber. Now, like if you have a person who says, yeah, I do greens and reds, but I also like the taste, is there one that's better? You get greater absorption with food over supplements, and across the board. That's true of powders with proteins. That's true of different nutrients. That's true of multivitamins. That's true of everything.
Yep.
Right? It doesn't mean the supplement's not effective. It just means that you're not going to absorb as much as from the actual source of the nutrition. So, yeah, I think if you're in the camp of I can't do it at all, and you can afford and you like the greens and the reds, why not?
That's cool. Let's go on to number 4 so that we keep the listeners reminded of the rules. It's protein every meal, no calorie intake in between meals.
Yep.
Produce with every meal.
Yep.
And then number 4.
Whenever you're choosing carbohydrates, make them from whole food sources. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. Number 1, we know that especially as intensity grows with training, the body and the muscle is going to prefer to fire from carbohydrate intake. So, this isn't a message about like go low carbohydrate intake. But where a lot of this messaging has been misconstrued over the years is found in the dose, the type, and the frequency of carbohydrate intake that most people get. And where you can separate these two is complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrates are going to be processed very slow. They're going to be very full of nutrition. They're going to be very difficult to overeat, and they're going to provide better satiety. They're going to keep you fuller longer. And again, you're kind of seeing a theme now that almost everything we're doing is aimed at trying to give you good, stable energy levels over the course of the day, as opposed to experiencing these roller coaster rides of different things. And if you compare that to simple carbohydrate intake, which is processed very quick, isn't very filling, the source that they package them in is generally really easy to overeat, and they lack nutrition. And so going back to the dose, the frequency, and the type conversation, where we've got it wrong, meaning the American diet as a whole, is we tend to eat too much, way too high of a dose, way too often, frequency, and the wrong type. We eat a lot of simple, easy to digest carbohydrates that have driven us towards having insulin resistance and developing diabetes. But the message that has come out of that is no carbs. No carbs. Shouldn't eat any carbs. That's not true either, right?
Wrong way. Too far on an extreme.
Too far of an extreme and unnecessarily too, right? So when you're eating carbohydrates, we know that they provide value, especially if you're training. And so trying to set a simple rule of, look, if you're going to include these, have them from whole food sources, sweet potatoes, even regular potatoes, oatmeal, brown rice, good nutrient dense sources that are going to be filling for you.
And which ones are we avoiding? Just example foods.
Yeah. So anything that's, candy, lattes, sugar, cookies, cupcakes, those type of things that are, I don't want to say packaged, because there's a lot of packaged complex carbohydrates that are convenient that would simplify people's lives from a prep standpoint and change things for them. So I don't want to funnel that under packaged, but anything that that's got like an added sugar element to it would fall under that category.
What about fries with ranch?
That would fall under that category. Now,
that's like kryptonite.
But I do think that it's like, so you go back to the conversation of potatoes of any kind. If you slice those and throw them in the oven and bake them, like that's a different element than
the oil.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like air fryer or something.
Air fry, throw them in the oven. There's a lot of different ways. One thing that we do is we'll poke them, microwave them for a little bit, just to the point of where they're not quite as hard as they are normally.
Yep.
Brush them with like a little olive oil or whatever, salt, put them on the grill.
Yeah, those are good.
Like having those alongside of a steak, and you could say like, well, what makes that so different than like what Dustin said from a French fry. A lot of like packaged fries, for example, even if you're baking those, are par fried before they ever get to the grocery store. So the company is cutting them from a whole potato. They're sticking them in a fryer. They're getting them partially cooked in that fryer and then freezing them, packaging them, sending them to you. And so like we'll talk a little bit more about that whenever we get to number, I think it's 6, as to why that's not as ideal.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. All right, let's go to 5 then. So we're going to do protein. We are going to limit any calories outside of mealtime. We're going to do produce with every meal. Our carbohydrates are coming from whole food sources. And then number 5.
Number 5, have water between meals, specifically a minimum of 16 ounces. Now, like water is a major function of nearly every element in our body. But one of the major reasons we're suggesting this, just from a practical standpoint, is continuing with that theme of really trying to provide satiety, not getting overtly hungry between meals. And you know, a lot of us at this point have heard the adage of, oh, well, maybe you're not hungry, you're just thirsty. And sometimes that's true, but for the most part, the more water intake that you've got, the less likely you're going to be getting these signalings that could be confused with actual hunger. The second element of it, though, is that when you're processing food, when you're digesting food, when you're training, when you're doing any of this, there's often waste produced as a byproduct of metabolism, as a byproduct of training, as a byproduct of good things. Water helps facilitate you eliminating that waste, and that tends to encourage long-term health benefits as well. Like people, you're hearing all the time right now the ambiguous word of inflammation, right? And water as a whole drives down inflammation. We'll use training as an example. You train, the muscle gets inflamed as a result of that. There's wastes that are produced as a part of that. And so water just helps flush some of that and you recover faster. It's just that simple. It's not, it's not any unicorn-like mystical type of a thing.
Yep.
The third element of it is when you withhold anything from the body, when it does see it again, it wants to cling to it, right? So that's true of nearly everything in nutrition. If you withhold or you get low iron intake and all of a sudden you expose it to iron, it's going to increase the absorption. Whereas if you've got a big iron store and you eat something high in iron, it's not as concerned about retaining because it's got plenty and it recognizes that. Water's a lot of the same way. And so oftentimes you will see people set a goal with training or nutrition. They could be making strides towards seeing that goal, but that progress is masked because they're not drinking enough water and their body's just holding it. And so they feel bloated. They'll often complain of feeling like they're fluffy. They'll often not see anything happening on the scale or with inches. And a lot of that is not because of what they're doing not being effective. It is. It's just masked by holding water
as a survival mechanism.
And we are not great at drinking water, right? So setting, again, just trying to keep things super basic, 16 ounces of water between your meals. If you want more, you can. But we're trying to set something just to have people drinking more water to get those outcomes that we know will help.
So 16 ounces between meals as a minimum. And so we should be thinking about 3 16 ounces per day as kind of a baseline minimum.
As a baseline minimum. Yep.
And then like how many ounces is in that standard Nalgene?
Yeah. So this is 32. This would basically be 2 of those.
And that's pretty easy to get that done between like breakfast and lunch. And that would be a double dose on the minimum benchmark.
Yeah. And again, I think like if you're zealous and you want to aim for something, I would say aim to have one of these down before lunch, one between lunch and dinner, one between dinner and bed. I mean, that alone is going to get you close to 96. Well, it'll get you to 96 in a day.
And for you, I've noticed part of it is just the simplicity, just having a water bottle with you literally wherever you go.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got different sizes and like some of them are more convenient to carry. And I just over the years have made it, it just goes everywhere. And part of that too is if this is there, I don't get the urgency to drink anything else. Like I'm not, nothing. I could sit there and drink coffee all day, and I do drink a lot of coffee too. But if I've got water, I'm more likely to rely on that, and I would rather rely on that than sipping on something else.
Yeah, I've noticed my girls do gymnastics, and the Stanley Cup with the straw is like every gymnastics girl in their gym has one.
Yeah,
which is funny because they're kind of ridiculous. It's like a $50 cup with a straw.
Yeah.
But I crush water out of those things because I don't have to take off the lid to have a drink. I can just grab like my daughters and drink out of the straw. They're at the house all the time. But just that simple thing of going from a lid to a non-lid, like drastically increased my water intake.
My favorite little vessel, I mean, I did this one because it's on a plane, it's easier to carry, but my favorite one that I use at home is those squeeze bottles you see at like a football game where they just tilt their head back, you squeeze it and it just squirts. Yeah. Because the same reason, there's no lid to, I mean, that's probably very lazy of me, but it's true. Like I can just put it up and pop. And I'll say too, like one of the things for the water intake that some people struggle with is like, they just don't like the taste. They just don't like plain water. If it encourages you to get 16 ounces in and you've got a, no calorie flavor adder that you want to throw in there, I think that, I don't see any reason not to if it encourages water intake. And again, if it's no calories, then it's not contributing towards everything that we talked about under rule number 2, which again is not about restriction. It's more about trying to, just create some different habits and reduce the overexposure of nutrition to yourself. That's great. And same with, there's different brands of this, but like a LaCroix or those different carbonated waters that have flavor, there's no calories in those. If that is your water choice du jour that helps you, by all means, don't make it harder than you need to either. Go ahead and have that.
Those can help for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so recapping, we're going to have protein with every meal. We are going to only eat during our set meal times, no calories in between. We're going to have produce with every single meal, and then we're going to get our carbs from whole food sources. We are going to drink 16 ounces of water between meals as a baseline minimum. And then what's next?
You're good at this. You're crushing it already.
The recap.
Yeah. So what's next, I think, will probably be the hardest one for everyone. And that is to eat out less, one time per month or less.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, that is a tough one. And I think what comes tough with that is now there's not as much convenience, right? And we can circle back to the convenience element too. Reasoning here is a couple different reasons. So on average, the average American household eats out 8 times in a month. Most people spend almost $170 per person, per household, per month on eating out. It's not even really the financial element of it that we've created this, but it's more about what you're conserving by doing so. Restaurant meals the intake increases at least 20% over something that you could make, right? From a calorie standpoint. The bigger concern, I guess, with this is where that 20% comes from, which is predominantly fat.
Let's highlight that real quick. So like a great meal at home versus a great meal at a restaurant, 20%
Increase.
More calories.
Minimum.
That's crazy.
Yep. And I mean, that can play across the board think about like if you go to Subway and you were to look up what your average turkey sandwich is nutrition wise, you are assuming that John behind the counter at Subway is putting the exact measurement on that sandwich that came in, at whatever that nutrition label says that it is. I've been to a lot of Subways. I've met a lot of Johns, and they're usually not too concerned. Like, in fact,
just winging it.
Yeah, if you go enough, you might get someone who's like, "I got you, bro." He'll double meat, double cheese you without you knowing it, right?
Yeah.
And so, the 20% element is a component of it, but it's where those 20% come from as well. Most often, it's going to be a lot higher in saturated fat, and particularly a lot higher in different fried foods. So this goes back to us talking about your question with fries and ranch and par frying things and seed oils, which has become really popular. The greater concern with seed oils and where they could potentially cause some risks with health is in the constant heating and cooling and breakdown of those oils. So a restaurant will they'll pour a new batch of oil in a fryer and they'll fry food all day. It'll cool all night. They'll rinse and repeat, and they'll use that oil over and over and over again. The chemical breakdown that happens in that oil does start to oxidize. It does start to break down, and that's not great for us. So the less that you're exposing yourself to that, the better the long-term health, the more you can live ready. Remember, we're eating out largely 8 times in a month. So if you're reducing, you're saving 80 times per year that you're doing this. And remember,
dang,
it's like it's not the one order that's doing you in, or even 2, or even 3.
It's 80 times 20%
in a year, and then or more in a year, and then you're extrapolating that over the course of a lifetime. It's 160 every 2 years. It's 240 every 3. That's a lot of exposure.
It's a lot of calories, a lot of increased fat.
And a lot of the type, right? And that's the bigger issue is it's like there is no absolutes in nutrition. No single choice is ever going to do you in. Where we get it wrong, again, is the dose, the frequency, and the type of everything. We overdo it. We overexpose it of the wrong types. And it's that over time, multiplied by time, that create all of the problems that now we're recognizing as like, oh man, we're not in a good situation here.
It's the consistency principle. Yeah. It's the king for positive change, but it's also the same king for negative change.
Yeah, I to some degree right now. So the election just happened, and there's all this conversation about changes in food policy, and I sort of sometimes chuckle to myself because people want change in food policy and they want ingredients out of their food. It's like if you made your food, you wouldn't have to worry about what's in it. You wouldn't need a change in food policy, right? And a lot of times it's, again, there's no single thing in our food that is doing us in. It's how much of it we're eating, how often we're eating it, and the fact that you multiply that type of a that type of a pattern over years that leads to what we are now in 2024, 2025, recognizing is like, oh man, we got a little bit of a situation here. Right. And so I think again, like the eating out less than once a month is not the financial aspect of it, although it'll save you a lot of money. It's more about trying to reduce the exposure to some of these things that over time can certainly lead to, you get a lot more exposure from that than when you're cooking at home. Now, I mean, you could make the argument that it depends on what you're cooking at home too, but for the most part, if you're making good decisions at home, you're going to eliminate a lot of that risk that's concerning with food at restaurants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it keeps you at home with the family, and family time is improved.
Yeah.
Quality of life at home is improved. You're at your own dinner table, engaging with your own family, no distractions. So there's a lot of benefits there.
Yeah, conversations around a dinner table. Yeah, there's a lot to be said with that.
The 20% increase is crazy, and it's like chronic stress will kill us. Acute stress won't. So if we're chronically stressed for 10 years because of work, that will start to cause some very negative ramifications. If we're acutely stressed one day because a grizzly bear pops out on an elk hunt, that's not going to kill us. And it's the same with the nutrition. It's like 10 years of bad decisions, 5 years of bad decisions really, really stack up against us. And eating out for 10, 20, 30 years is pretty common, multiple times per month. And some people, I would say, like in our circle here in Bozeman, just from my experience, are out there way more than 80 times a year. So, then you have the 20% rule every single time you're out. And then all these restaurants, many times the reason the food tastes so phenomenal when you eat out versus when you're at home is because of these crazy high calorie, high fat ingredients, butter, sugar, that's making everything taste so phenomenal.
And I'll say this, like, there are going to be people who are watching this who say, I can't. My job is sales. I travel. I've got meetings with clients. Like, I can't do less than one. You can take the rules that we've laid out up to this point and pick wisely, potentially make the argument of picking wiser at these restaurants than maybe you have in the past. So again, like, these are set parameters not to be just this massive restriction, but designed to be, doing this once a week is not going to produce anything. If you do this daily for 8 weeks, it's going to produce a lot.
Yeah.
If you do this daily for a year,
massive.
And if you do this daily for 5 years, now you're not just changing like your overall energy level, you're impacting the overall trajectory of your health. And so if you find yourself in situations where it's like, I can't adhere to this one because I've got clients, I'm traveling all the time, blah, 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 you can take it another level, still implement it by saying, when I go out, I'm still going to try to eat protein. I'm still going to try to get carbohydrate sources from whole foods. I'm still going to try to include a source of produce as I go out, and still try to make wise decisions. At the hotel I stayed at, they've got a continental breakfast, and you can certainly destroy that.
For sure.
But they've also got stuff there that you can choose wisely, right? And for sure, I think until you develop until you get into a rhythm of eating more like this, saying no to biscuits, gravies, and the Build a Waffle Bar is difficult. But every time you make that difficult decision, the opportunity to make it the next time gets easier. The opportunity gets easier the next time, until eventually you've got so much intentional decision making under your belt that it's thoughtless. It's not even you look at the waffle and you're like, kids probably like that, and it's not a thing.
Yeah,
you know,
don't go there. Yeah. That's that mental toughness, which plays right into your physical.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I want to let you know about Jace Medical. I know a lot of Mountain Tough customers, a lot of Mountain Tough community members, those listening to this podcast, are going on big hunts, massive expeditions all over the world. We love seeing that, and we love that you already know that you have to train physically for these trips. You have to train with your weapon. You need to be proficient with your weapon, but an often overlooked area of these expeditions is your personal medication. We actually just got back from a trip like this. The Mountain Tough crew went to Kyrgyzstan, and we needed the peace of mind of a customized medical kit that we could take with us, and we needed it at the exact time for this trip. So we went with Jace. We got our Jace case sent directly to us. We were able to grab it, open it up, throw it in our Kyrgyzstan pack, and take it with us. It gave us the peace of mind that in these international environments, we were going to be covered when it came to infection, GI issues, and anything else we were going to run into overseas medically. So check these guys out, an amazing company. The Jace case is going to come with 5 antibiotics that cover the 50 most common illnesses that you're going to run into anywhere in the world. But additionally, there's 29 add-ons that you can choose to customize your kit. So you can throw things in here like ivermectin, EpiPens, anything you need to customize it personally for you. So check these guys out, an amazing brand, amazing company, very practical for the Mountain Tough community. All you need to do is go to jacemedical.com and use the code MOUNTAINTOUGH at checkout. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. Okay, recapping again, we're going protein every meal. We are only eating at meal times, no snacking in between. We're doing produce every single meal. Our carbohydrates are coming from whole food sources. We're doing 16 ounces of water in between meals at a minimum. We are limiting eating out to once per month.
Yep.
And then where are we headed?
Number 7, maybe one of my favorites, which is the amount of screen time in the evening spent with other people or doing things that you want versus on screen time. Now, we can talk about what that looks like. The idea though here is, one, hopefully occasionally it's going to be dedicated towards doing something active. Most of us sit all day. And the data that we see you have 2 things going here. The data that we see for increased risk of all mortality for people who sit all day is crazy high. There's just like this, Michael Easter talks about this all the time whenever he comes in here with you guys, talks about it in his books, and he's right. The data shows the more you sit, the higher the likelihood you're going to die early. And so not being in front of a screen is probably going to mean you're going to be bored, which is probably going to have you doing something. You're not saying you got to go like crush 4 days or, do multiple workouts in a day, but something with friends, family, anything.
Yeah.
And then the other element of it, which he also talks a lot about, is screen time. There's no data that's come out where it says increased screen time helps us at all. And so it's as much about trying to engage with other people and to do things other than sitting all day as it is a reduction in screen time. The element that I would add to this is if you're saving potentially $800 a month, $170 per person per household eating out, use that. Take somebody else. Go to a climbing gym. In the winter, we've got 2 little boys who go crazy, and so we'll throw headlamps on and we'll call it night ops and go for little walks or hikes or get Nerf guns out or there's read a book, or if you've got a friend you haven't met up with, like there's so many different things that you could do. But the idea of it though is as much an element of reducing screen time as it is just taking that time that you've now got freed up to engage with other people, right? Like we talked about earlier, life is very short, and one of the things that I've grown to appreciate most about it is sharing it with people, right? And if you've now got, like, if I have found when you take an intentional step towards reducing screen time, you just sort of are like, well, what else am I going to do? I might as well call him and see if he wants to go, grab dinner, go for a walk, or as long as that dinner is your first time out for the month, or have him over for dinner.
Yeah, you have to be very intentional about it.
Yeah.
Because when you walk in the house, the screen time is going to be a big temptation from, a TV to a movie, to a computer to an iPad. The kids are going to want a movie or some TV time. your wife may want some downtime because she's been with the kids all day, so she really wants to watch a movie. So you are going to be tempted from all angles, and it is kind of that mindset of like, I have to make the harder decision here, even though it's going to be unpopular for a minute. And I've always found it's unpopular until you start doing the activity. So if I walk in and I'm like, everything off, kids, we're heading outside, grab your snow gear, we're going to build this jump, we're sledding in the backyard. There is some groaning at first. There's like, it's cold. I want to watch this show. But all that goes away as soon as you get out the door. Yeah. But you got to kind of fight through that 5 minutes of getting everyone outside.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point because, you know, we have a couple little boys. Nate's got a couple of kids, and, you know, we kind of all talk about our kids and how the families do when we get together. I think it's, you know, it's good for anyone who has that, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's with kids, whether it's with a roommate, friend, whatever. You're not different. Everybody gets home, you shut off the screens, there's always groaning. I don't feel like doing it. Like, yes, it would be so much easier to let my brain just drift off into something rather than trying to muster up the energy to play with kids or whatever. But I can't tell you I've ever regretted it. And so I think it's an important thing to say. What you're dealing with at home's got nothing to do with an abnormality with you or your kids. Everyone feels like that. The play, though, that people who have found success in this make is, yes, I don't want to, but I'm going to, right? It's just a non-negotiable for them. And you've referenced this phrase a lot during this, and you're right. It's interesting. I had a friend the other day say, you know, like, how do you develop mental toughness? And that is not to say that I am a dictionary definition of someone who's mentally tough. And my first response was, you know, I don't know, because the people that I do know that are mentally tough, they never talk about being mentally tough. Like they don't
just do it.
Yeah, they just do it.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, what they are doing is they are just doing the things they don't want to. Sometimes that's working out. Sometimes that's engaging with their kids. Sometimes that's not going out to eat. There's different elements of it that come up just about every day. And rather than talking themselves out of it, they just go engage in it. So, you know, I think that Weston made the comment at dinner, and I think he's right. He said, I think the average ordinary guy is mentally tough if he chooses to do that. And for most of us, myself included, I am an average ordinary guy. And the mental toughness that we see the great men and women in our military and stuff have, you know, we all want that. We admire that. And we think, well, I can't do that if I don't go through buds or if I don't go through this or that. It's like you can just through simple choices every day of like doing the very things you don't want to do hones that over time. And like one of the things that we say all the time with people is the idea is that eventually you will move from making intentional decisions to it just being the byproduct of daily choice. Like you don't even think about it anymore. It's just,
which they scientifically have proved it's like neuropathways in our brain, and we're rewiring those neuropathways by, you know, choosing the harder thing over and over again. It becomes the normal preferred wiring over time.
Yeah.
I found like with this principle in the Live Ready Challenge of limiting screen time in the evenings, I think like if you're a single person, that's a pretty easy rule to do really well at. Like if you're in your 20s or 30s, in terms of getting outside, the climbing gym is a great tool, especially in the winter. But with families, the thing that has been a game changer for me has been buying some really cool active stuff that you can easily buy with this budget you're saving from only eating out once per month. It's not crazy expensive stuff, but man, it definitely changed the game for our house. And so for a couple of years, it was the Papa Shot basketball.
Yeah.
Where you would like two hoops and you try to outscore each other. We would play that like every night for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And then last winter I did ping pong. So bought the ping pong table, and we would just have these huge tournaments every single night. So just little tiny hacks like that, because you want to sit there and watch TV, but if you have this big ping pong tournament going, it was like a $200 Amazon ping pong table. And so like we're having fun as a family, we're engaged as a family, we're competing as a family, we're limiting screen time, and the girls are getting crazy like cognitive function skills from ping pong, muscle memory, athleticism.
Yeah.
So some of this stuff can be kind of intimidating, but just like everything, just make it simple.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that. And, that could be like, hey, why don't you guys invite a couple friends over and we'll make pizzas here at home, and like, we'll make homemade pizzas and do a big ping pong tournament. Like, there's just so many different options. And you're right. I think that it can be challenging to come up with ideas, but as you start thinking, like, make a list, and the winter's tough because like there's the seasonal depression that comes with winter for a lot of people. It's dark at 4:30. It's light at like 8. And even then it's usually there's an inversion if you live in a Western state, and it can be hard. So finding time to get outside, spend it with people, and doing some of these, I think just makes the winter go by a lot faster and a lot more enjoyable.
Okay. We got one principle left in the Live Ready Challenge. I'm going to do the recap again. So we are doing protein at every meal. We are going to limit calorie intake between our set meal times. We're doing produce at every single meal. Our carbohydrates are coming from whole food sources. We're having 16 ounces of water minimum between meals. Then we are going to limit eating out to once per month. Then we are doing, is there one between screen time? Did I get them?
Nope,
all?
you got
Okay.
it.
And then screen time, we're limiting every single evening. So one rule left. The Live Ready Challenge is going to have 8 principles. We talked about 7. What's number 8?
Mountain Tough 5 times a week.
Nice.
Yep. So some kind of training to, you can pick between MGD, gym day. There are so many different options based off of what you want or what you want to focus on for whatever season that you're in. But the activity element is key. And we've touched on this several times throughout this podcast. A major element of this goes back to that 3 to 8% muscle mass loss beginning per decade, beginning at age 30, and an element of that being regular resistance training, right? So I think that one of the things that I love the most about the app is a basic premise of effective training is progressive overload. And if you don't, most people don't know or care what that means. They just want something that works. The app takes that, the app takes the challenging piece of that out of it. If you get in and you follow the structure, that is taking place. It's written into it,
For
right?
sure.
Because of how intelligently the programs are written out. And so, like, for people wanting to have something that's actually working for them, that's a key element. And one of the traps that you can fall into is you can be active, and that's good, but it loses its efficacy over time if you're just doing the same thing all the time. So I think that there's different tiers with training, right? Like you've got tier 1 where if you're doing nothing but you start going for walks, that's going to improve your overall life. Like we talked about earlier, the more steps that you have, the less sitting time that you have, the more the mortality risk goes down. So like that alone is doable for a lot of people. But then there's an element too that's involved there where if you have a training program that is progressive overload, and there is variety in the sense of you move from a 12-week program to a different 12-week program that focuses on something else, the body never adapts, and you tend to lean towards that 3% increase instead of the 8% increase of loss.
Which is big.
It is big. I mean, that's nearly triple, right?
Yeah.
And if you think about it like that, you're like, well, 3 and 8% is not that big, but you're talking about carrying the triple the amount of muscle mass into age 40, 50, and 60. And again, muscle mass not just being, oh, I want size, I want to fill out a t-shirt, whatever. We are equivocating retention of muscle towards ability to
Yep.
do things that you want.
Quality
It
of
has
life.
nothing to do about the size of your bicep. No one cares about that, but maybe you, right? We are saying that gives you the ability. If you lean on 3% instead of 8, 9, whatever more percent, you now are saying, I have 3 times the ability in my 40s, in my 50s, and my 60s to do the things that I want to do safely. That's a big deal, right? And so the Mountain Tough element is basically, that is an easy button, no excuse way for people to get great programming that leans you towards the 3 instead of the 8, in combination with the good protein intake to ensure that you're able to truly live ready and do the things that you want on a decade by decade basis as you continue to age.
Yeah, it really ties everything together because in the app, the listeners, if you do not know, if you're not already a Mountain Tougher, it is pretty wild how the program offerings now in Mountain Tough Plus are readily available for whoever you are, your lifestyle, your fitness level, whether that's beginner, intermediate, elite, whether you like to train at home, whether you like to train in the gym, whether you like full gear, minimal gear, weight vest, heavy pack, body weight. It is an option for every single person out there essentially now in this kind of evolution of the app.
Yeah.
And then the dailies, they're quickly becoming our most popular and successful product category inside of the app. And so with the Live Ready Challenge, consumers can easily do a minimal gear daily, a full gear daily. Their mobility is in there right around the time this comes out. There will be more of like a yoga type product. There's the spiritual product.
Yeah.
But there's really no excuse left in the app that they can't follow rule number 8. So following a Mountain Tough program 5 days a week, there's something for everyone, regardless of their style, their goals, their fitness level. And it is kind of at a no excuses point now where in the app, pick the one you want to follow 5 days a week. All you need to do is just open it up and hit play. But it really is tying everything else together very nicely because the community's there. So the community, you're going to see this beautiful, like-minded community in the app that is chasing similar goals of this always ready lifestyle. And them posting about their workouts, talking about how they performed in the workout is going to motivate you and add that extra layer of accountability. But by following a Mountain Tough program, you are going to want to make sure that you're following rule 1 through 7 because you had this amazing workout. Now you don't want to screw it up with poor nutrition choices. You had this amazing workout, so now you are craving better, high quality food. Yeah. You had this great workout, so now you are thirsty for water. You had this great workout, so you're going to have a great night of sleep. And because of that great night of sleep, you're thinking better the next day to make better decisions. So it does connect it really nicely.
Yeah. Yeah. We I think that it works together great. You know, we've talked before about if nutrition alone can help improve overall health, it can facilitate weight loss without training. The training element, though, is really where, like, those two hand in hand is really where everything happens that most people want. Because training or eating high protein diet with no resistance training will not keep muscle mass. You have to have both. And nutrition alone is not going to drive that. In fact, like, the training and a well-written program is often going to produce the outcomes people want. Nutrition just allows you to go execute that programming. And so again, like, you go back to element number 4, carbohydrates, where it's like, okay, there's a difference between the conversation of going no carb and changing to whole food carbohydrates, especially when you consider that the muscle fires faster at high intensity volumes whenever there's carbohydrate present. you're not going to be able to get the most out of your workout if you don't have the fuel in the muscle needed to execute the workout. So it truly is like you're saying, I just agree with you that it truly is this just this great synergy when you're doing both to try to live ready, because having one without the other really doesn't allow you to get the most out of either. And it's when you do both, and you do both at kind of that ideal level through these 8 different things that we've laid out, that you really start to feel what it is you hear people feel when they start a new program, right? Yeah. And so I think that's effective, and it makes me excited for people who try it.
Yeah, it creates that life transformation, which is what we want and what we're going to see out of this for sure. All right, you have to do the recap now.
All right. Number 1, have protein source with every meal. Number 2, create some structure to your meals with the main idea of not having any calorie intake outside of those different times. Number 3, have a source of produce with every meal. Number 4, carbohydrate intake comes from whole food sources. Number 5, have water between meals, ideally hitting a minimum of 16 ounces in between those. Number 6, eating out less than or at one time per month. Number 7, time with people, time doing something other than spinning it in front of a screen is the predominant focus, especially in the evenings, through the challenge. And then number 8, Mountain Tough 5 times a week.
I love it. I think it's, as we've been talking, I think that I want to highlight how simple this is for people. So if you're listening to this right now, this is incredibly simple. It's 8 rules and 8 principles. This podcast, we've gone into depth on every single one, which can make it seem more complicated than it is. I think the depth that we've added to each principle is incredibly valuable for listeners to know why you set it up this way, Kyle, in the background of how these things, each and every one of them, have a purpose and a meaning and intention behind them. But I don't want anyone to think that because we've been talking about them for a little while, that this is a complicated process.
Yeah.
This is extremely, extremely simple to follow these 8 principles. There's nothing drastically complicated here at all. This is something that anyone and everyone should do, and they're not going to have to tweak their lifestyle much to accomplish this. So it's not going to take much of a lifestyle tweak. It will take some work and some discipline and some sacrifice.
Yeah.
And it will make a significant difference. And I love that we've described each one so people know the why, because understanding the why is really, really important. So the why between all 8, but just know that it is incredibly simple to execute on all 8 of these. And lastly, how long would you like people to follow these 8 principles?
Well, we've set it up to be 8 weeks, right? But I think how long someone follows it's largely going to be determined by how capable they want to be. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I hope this doesn't sound harsh, but you are the only person who wins from this, right? I mean, the award and the prize that you get is feeling better, living better, having better energy, maintaining more mass, i.e. more capability to do what you want throughout the course of life, reducing your risk of chronic disease. And so how long you follow that is largely going to be determined by how important those things are to you. Now, it's very easy to hear those things and think, oh, me, sign me up, I'll do this for the rest of my life. But as simple as they are, it doesn't mean it's easy. And the challenging part that's going to come for a lot of folks, and that it comes for everyone, and was definitely present for me when I first, lost weight, however many years ago that was, is it's just not my normal rhythm. And anytime you start or change anything, it's difficult at first. But it's just like, to me, like I just envision it to be like hunting, in the sense of, to get anywhere for the most part that's worth hunting, you've got to invest a lot of climbing. And you're probably climbing to a ridge or a point on a ridge, like a saddle or something like that, a little pocket you're interested in. Once you make that initial pull, you're on a ridge line, and the ridge line's fairly easy compared to that first pull. And so these first 8 weeks, maybe it's 12 for you, maybe it's 16 for you. You're essentially making the pull to the ridge, but eventually you get to the ridge. And that's really the goal, is bite the bullet, be intentional, have some structure to climb to the ridge, because eventually it does get easier, right? But that initial investment is challenging. And so, I think that's why we set it up for 8 weeks as a minimum, because the hope is that by the time you get to the 8th week, it's such a rhythm for you that it's almost harder to go back than it is just to keep going, And a lot of times change in habits, like a permanent change in habit, is as much about just doing things over and over again until it starts to feel natural. And 8 weeks is long enough to where you should start to feel that to some degree, where you start to feel like, all right, I'm in this, I'm in it far enough now that I'm built a rhythm, and continuing on seems easier than going backwards does. So we may as well. And I think 8 weeks too, like at that point, you're going to start to see the reward of not being on your screen as much intrinsically. And if you have a family, you may start to see that reward in them too, or if you have friends or whatever. If you're eating out less, you may start to see the reward of feeling better, and you may start to see the financial reward of spending less money, eating out. And if those things become more attractive to you than the convenience of whatever it is you were doing previously, boy, it sure seems like an easy thing just to keep doing it.
The analogy of the ridge is beautiful, because that is how it works. At first, this is kind of daunting, like getting to that false summit, but then hiking on that ridge line, it is just over time, especially towards the end of that 8 weeks, it just becomes part of your lifestyle. Those habits are formed, and it's not as much discipline and motivation to hit these 8 principles. But you got to start. You got to start by putting in some of that hard work and sticking with it until it becomes muscle memory, essentially, which is what we're looking for.
And it does. I think it's important to know, like, if it does eventually get there, to where it starts to feel like muscle memory, and there's less work in the thought of it all, and you start to build a good rhythm.
Love it. Well, we are at a time, so I want listeners to know the Live Ready Challenge, by the time you're listening to this podcast, is live in the app. You're going to find more information in the app about the challenge. A lot more content from Kyle is in the app, guiding you through this with micro content each day for around the next 40 days. The MTNTOUGH coaches will be talking about the Live Ready Challenge, so you'll see Nick and Sarah talking about some motivational examples and context of this in the MGD and the Gym Daily. And so the community will be rallied around it for the next 8 weeks. So if you're not a subscriber yet, go ahead and start your free trial so that you can start the 8-week Live Ready Challenge with us. And thanks so much for putting this together, Kyle. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love being a part of it, so I appreciate you guys inviting me into it.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
What a great conversation with Kyle. I hope you guys participate in the Live Ready Challenge with the MTNTOUGH community. It is going to make a massive, massive difference. And I am so glad that Kyle provided all of that context today on why he set it up the way he did, why he selected the rules he selected, because we do know it's going to make a big, big difference. And I loved how he put the why behind those principles today. We will be going through this together as a MTNTOUGH community. You'll hear us talk about it in the dailies. So Sarah's going to be talking about it in the MGDs. Nick will be talking about it in the gym dailies. So make sure, if you don't already have a subscription to MTNTOUGH, you can do that on our free trial. And as a podcast listener, you do get a special offer where the free trial goes up to 6 weeks. So for 6 weeks of free MTNTOUGH, all you need to do is check out with the code MOUNTAINPOD. That's MTNPOD, all caps, all one word. That gets you an extra 30 days on the app plus the 14-day free trial. So you have 6 weeks of Mountain Tough Plus for free. So that way you can dive into this challenge with Kyle Kamp. You can also dive into any program, whether that's a beginner, intermediate, or elite level program. Additionally, it's going to unlock all of our mental, spiritual, nutritional, and bonus content. So there's no better way to start off 2025 than doing this challenge, the Live Ready Challenge with us and Kyle Kamp. And as he talked about, making sure you're on the Mountain Tough program of your choice. Best way to do that, if you're not a subscriber already, is use that code MOUNTAINPOD. Just go to mountaintough.com